Okay, we're back. Good morning. John Delossantos, JMD Healthcare, bringing you part 2 of our super informative, like no other, Section GG success training. You know, this was a big thing that's been requested. I took a little time to put it together, put it in 2 parts because I just think it's that important to really take it slow. Now, part 1, I really set you guys up to really dig into this and dig into the coding side of this. I really broke down between PT and OT, nursing, Section G, Section GG, how all the different levels intertwine, how they kind of relate to each other. Very valuable to hear it from someone who's both a therapy expert, MDS expert, PDPM expert, and pretty darn good therapist. So I know how the documentation piece works too. And I've never seen anyone do it like I've been doing this. You know, they do a really good job of reading it from the manual and clipping parts out of it and putting it on your screen. I mean, you don't need anyone to read to you. I have really good examples and true, real examples. I tweak a little bit, take the names out of there. Don't want to, give out any information, but real life functional examples. You know, a lot of these people dealing with PDPM are analytical companies. They pretty much only know what's on paper. A lot of them aren't even clinicians. Be very careful with that. If you are going to get advice, especially on coding, get it from someone who has some experience in the field, please. They can tell you what you didn't catch, what you did catch, what you did capture, what you should capture, what the averages are. That's all fine. But when it comes to the operational side and putting these things in clinical practice, not too useful there. And actually, I've gotten a few people in trouble by overshooting for some goals and not letting them or helping them validate those claims. Don't fall for that trap. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. So think about that. But we'll go through this. You guys are primed and ready. Like I said, let's go ahead and get this thing moving forward. Of course, we want to go over a few of the objectives, a few of the learning objectives we're going to be dealing with. We break these down a little differently just because I use this for some future trainings. You can, ask about that. Call our office at 801 PDPMpro if you want to hear more about that. But for this webinar, just going to break these down. We are going to do a quick review. I'm talking quick. I'm just going to run through, put the terms back in your head, and we're moving on. I'm not going to re-explain everything, but I'm going to pop through those functional levels for each of the coding ideas like the therapy, GG, G, nursing, how they all do it. Pop through them really quick so how they relate to each other. If you didn't see part 1, you should see part 1. You're already here, so whatever, might as well go through the rest. But part 1 would be a really, really helpful thing for you to set you up, even if you've done this before. I really laid it out in a very, very good way. But I'm going to flip through that really quickly so you can see that again. Then we're going to move on to the section 4, which is going to be the first 4, part 2. And we're going to go through the decision tree process. A lot of you have heard of the decision tree. It's something that I think actually Medicare put it out originally. And it may even be in the REI manual somewhere in the back in those appendices in the back. But you can see this on the internet. It just goes through, and it's a really good thing to have somebody talk you through because it can really take you through the steps to make sure you haven't missed any levels. People try to guess what the level is right away, and that may not be the best way to do it because you can get confused. And if you go up, down, is it this or that? But if you go through this process, it may help. And I'm just going to bust through this quick. I'm not going to take a ton of time on it, and then I think you have a really better understanding of it. Then we're going to do some actual PDPM Section GG functional scoring with some examples, show you how those get laid out. Then at Section 5, I got some tips for each functional item under Section GG. We're going to run through the MDS one more time, where they are, and then some tips on how to get one of those as best accurate as possible. Then we're going to go over the look-back periods, just so everyone quickly understands those. Most people do. We only have one assessment and then an IPA, if you do them, which you need to do more of them, by the way. But that's really the only ones you have. So it's really that one initial 5-day IPAs. We're going to run through the look-back periods. And then 6, we're going to use some last examples, maybe some full-worded examples on self-care and mobility. And I think you guys are going to get a really good feel for what you should be looking for with these. I did them in a certain way where it's actually going to have a conflict between the nursing and the therapy stuff, and I'm going to tell you how to work your way through that and pick the best one, the most accurate one, because that's what we're looking for. That's what Medicare is looking for, accuracy. All right, that's it. Let's move and let's do this. Here's the review. We have the MDS coding, section GG performance, functional levels from therapy, nursing scoring for GG, or for G, for G, which doesn't contribute anymore, by the way. Just remember that. But it is still on the MDS until we get into the next MDS, which we're not really sure when that's going to be coming out. They put a hold on it, but it will be leaving the MDS, but it's still there for now. So you still should be doing this, the right way. Anyway, okay. So for dependent, pretty easy. 0-1, dependent for MDS coding. Therapy will say dependent. That means therapist does 100% of the work. We don't treat a ton of people that are dependent and everything, but there's our occasions where we will eval and try to work on some skills. And then for the section G coding, it's code 4, total dependence. So pretty consistent across the board. Not much you can screw up on that one. Now, the next ones are a little more confusing. This is where we had the little therapy stuff that doesn't quite fit or could fit in more than one category. And again, therapy, coding, documentation, functional levels are there for a reason. Please don't let your contract therapy companies remove these. They're better for goals. They show progress. They're easy to validate claims. There's no reason why anyone, an MDS coordinator, even a therapist, should not be able to decipher between their own evals and what the coding should be. Don't remove these, man. They are there for a reason. They still teach them in school. We want to keep them there. But anyway, there are more options that are going to fit. And that's fine. You just got to know the rules. So 0-2 is going to be that maximum assist, substantial assist, more than half on the MDS. That could fall under max assist or moderate assist for therapy. I mean, it could be either one of those because that's how therapists do stuff. And then for section G, it is going to be that 3 extensive assist, which is pretty much one of their flaws they had with G. And it went from like a touch assist to there was no middle ground there. But those will lie out. Now we get into the 0-3 partial moderate assist, which for now for GG for the scoring for the MDS is less than half the effort. That is more around the minimal assist. And I really explain this really well. I mean, you see these numbers, well, that doesn't make sense. And you need to watch part 1 then, because people have already seen it. I'm not going to waste their time. If you really don't understand why that's important and why that works, watch part 1, but it has to do with how patients work with therapists. They work a little bit at a higher level. They work better. Nobody that's moderate assist, is going to be coming out at moderate assist. No one who's moderate assist for therapists is going to be moderate assist for nursing. They're going to be more. They need to be substantial. So that's kind of why that's on there. Go check that out, and I'll explain it a little bit better. So the translation, what you really want to know, 50% or more of assistance, that max assist is for max assist or moderate assist under therapy documentation will be the max assist for GG, for the MDS. Then the next one, same thing. We still got some controversy here. 0-4, supervision or touching assistance for section GG on the MDS. Could be contact guard or standby assist with therapy, because we have 2 different levels. We have the standby assist where it doesn't need any of that contact, even straightening or writing, or what do they call that? Steadying. But we also be contact guard with it a little bit, or standby assist. We could be either one of those. For either one of those, it's going to be the same on section GG. Okay, and then for nursing under G, they have the limited assist, which is physical guidance or maneuvering the limbs, non-weight-bearing assistance, like the contact guard for therapy. That's what that means. And then the supervision, same thing as kind of what therapy was. So that's how those line up. Setup's pretty consistent across the board. 0-5, setup, therapy, setup, getting the stuff ready, but you don't have to do any assistance anywhere else. Now, independent, a little bit strange because therapy actually uses this thing called modified independence. We are therapists. We think of new ways of doing things. It is our skill. It justifies and validates our claims when we do these things. So please don't take this away from your therapist. Once again, it's very important. I mean, having the ability to help somebody, assist somebody in being more independent is what we do. And if we're going to independence, it may not be completely there, but it still will be considered independent if it's modified independence with a therapist because they put in some new skills or put in some new strategies. That's still going to be coded as 0-6, independent on your MDS. Okay, even if you see that modified independence, and that is purposely put in there so we can show progress, we can hit our goals, and we can show our skill. Please don't take that away from your therapist. All right, like we said, and I told you I was going to go through that fast, so don't be mad at me. If you really need to go over that again, that's what part 1 was for. We really covered. That's pretty much what we covered in part 1. So please review part 1, and you will have a really good understanding of that. Everyone else, again, has already done that. So let's move on to the decision tree, which will help you make those decisions with those patients based upon what they do with each activity you're presenting to them. Now, my first one, I do this a little bit differently because I did it a way that people talk, and not a way that, a weird way that people would talk, I guess. Can somebody do this all by themselves without any help? The way they worded it in some of the things I've seen is, can someone complete this without the assistance of a helper? Yes or no? Well, nobody talks like that. Can they do it on their own? Yes or no? So that's how I did mine. Does resident need assistance? Physical, verbal, nonverbal cueing, setup, cleanup, all the stuff we were talking about, to complete a self-care activity. No. Boom. Independent. No, independent. That's where you start. Now, if it's yes, now we start through our I don't know what you want to call it, your rankings of assistance, so you don't miss one or get confused. You can go right down the line, right? Does the resident only need setup or cleanup assistance? Like I said in part 1, could you leave in the middle? Could you set it up, leave, come back and clean it up, and not have to be, thinking that would need any help at all, not even to worry about it? If that is yes, you code 05, setup and cleanup assistance. Okay? Real easy. Now, if it's no, she needs more help than that. He needs more help than that. If I set it up, I'll come back. It'll still be sitting there. I'll have to help him with it. All right? So that'll be a no. All right? So the next question is, does the resident only need verbal cues? Steadying or touching assistance. You just need to be there to be a helping hand on how to get it done, and just in case they get a little wobbly, but you don't really do anything else. Are you just there to make sure that you're walking them through it? Verbal cues. Hey, watch that. Don't forget this. Okay, be careful when you come through here. If you're just doing that, standing next to them, not really lifting at all, not doing any weight bearing assistance, that would be what this is asking you. Now, if it's yes, then you code it 04, supervision, touching assistance. You say, no. If I go in there, we need to go in there. We're going to have to give her some physical support. We're going to have to give her some help. So it would be a no. The question would be, does the resident need lifting assistance or trunk support with a helper, one, providing less than half the effort? If you're doing half the effort, sometimes that's hard to gauge. I think we talked about in part 1. It's hard to make that determination. Was that half, less than half, over half? Just think about the activity. Think about what they're doing. Okay? If you're helping somebody dress up her body and they only would have got in half their arm, if not for you to get in the rest, that would be more than half. Or if someone would have got it all done and just needed a little bit of help to get their last arm up and through their sleep, that would be obviously less than half. So just think about the activity, what it takes to complete it, and how much. This isn't an exact science. It's an idea, kind of giving someone a functional level just based upon how much effort you're going to have to put in to help them. So you just kind of have to, you get used to doing this after a while. It's not even something you have to think about. That's why it's kind of even hard for me to explain. It just comes to you when you're doing it. You can tell if you're doing less or half or not. But just do your best. Ask for opinions from some other people, and they'll help you out with that. So if you do feel like you're doing less than half, like you're just doing a little bit of the work, they're doing the majority of it, you would code that as 03, partial mod. If you're like, oh no, I was doing way more than half. It was pretty much, it was a lot of work for me. I did most of it. Okay. Then the question would be, I guess, next, does the resident need lifting assistance or truck support with a helper, one, providing more than half? Okay, yeah, that's right. So that'd be 02, substantial or maximal assist. Or if you said, no, quite honestly, they didn't help me at all. I did it all for them. They were dependent. They didn't. So the question would be, does the helper provide all of the effort to complete the activity or require 2 or more helpers? Now we're bringing in helpers. All the ones before those, helper, 1. As soon as it gets to 2, it goes to dependent. You could even say, yeah, they were helping out some, but to get her, to really get her pants up all the way, we need two people to do that safely. It's over. It's dependent. No matter what, you need two people. And that can be confusing in some therapy situations as well, because there are times we may put min assist of 2 because you just need that second person. But again, like I explained in 1, that's because we as therapists are working on certain things. So if I want to do an activity with Mrs. Smith and I want her sitting on the edge of the bed to challenge her balance, but I want her reaching at the same time, I may have another person help me to help maintain her balance when she's sitting while I'm in front of her assessing her reach. So she's focusing on me and someone else doing that. I mean, it may only be a minimal assist of both of us to be able to get these activities done, but it still requires 2 people for safety because I can't be out here making her reach and stop her if she starts to fall in time safely. So there are times you will see min assist of 2, right? That still has to be dependent if that's all you're going by. If you're really only going by the 2, and that's what you have, that's what the RAI manual says. As soon as you need that, even if you need a wheelchair follow for safety, and you're going to walk her down the hall 15 feet, 10 feet, whatever you're doing, and you need someone to pull, and you can't do both. I've seen therapists try to do both. That's not a great idea. Everybody's seen it. You hook your finger in it. You have the gait belt. You're coming. If something really went haywire there and she starts going forward, you're not going to be able to get that chair in time. You're going to have to lower her to the floor. I always suggest you have a second person follow another helper. That just makes it safe. Then hey, you know what? And that's the second help person. That will make it dependent, but at least they're safe. So no matter what level of assist the second helper is giving, it is to be coded dependent. All right, so you got that dependent stuff down, 0, 1. Now here, really quick and easy way. Now, these are the answers on the MDS. This is what you code. These are the numbers you're putting in for coding, right? This is not the functional score, okay? Everyone thinks they tried to make it difficult, but what they did actually makes sense, okay? What they did is they coupled a couple of these together because they would equal, they're so similar, they shouldn't be docked in the score, right? So what they did for 6 and 5, if you code 6 and 5, independent or setup and cleanup. Now, once you set someone up and they get it all done themselves, and then you clean them up after, or clean up whatever items they needed, there is some independence in the middle of there. They are doing a lot of the stuff kind of on their own in the middle. You're just giving the setup help and the cleanup help. You're there to do that. So they code those things kind of the same for the functional score, because functionally, that isn't that different. So if you think about it, you do 0, 5. Let's look at what the score would be. That's a functional score of 4. Code 0, 6, 0, 5. They would get 4 functional, points, I guess, for the functional score. I'm going to show you how that all works in a minute. Really quick and dirty way to do this. 0, 4, and you see that 5, you code 5, you get that 4. Now, the next ones, they just come down a notch. So if you do a click, a 1, so if you code 0, 4, it becomes a 3. See how that works? If you code 0, 3, partial Ahmad, becomes a 2. If you come 0, 2, becomes a 1. And then this one even makes sense. If someone doesn't have any function, if they're completely dependent, they get a 0. All right? So take a look at that. It's a really easy way to remember. These people can never remember, what if they're partial moderate assist, how many functional points do they get? I can't, because the 3, it's not 3 because that's what I code. I can't remember what they get for the I'm serious. It can be confusing at first if you're not used to it. But this is a really easier way to look at it, because if it's dependence or independence, you may need to remind yourself, okay, if they're dependent, they should be getting no points. That's 0. And if they're independent, I know they get a 4 because that's the highest level you can get. And there is some independence even if you set someone up. So that's 4. Then all the other ones, they just come down 1 number. Code 04 for supervision or touching, you get a 3. Code 03 for partial or moderate assist, you get a 2. You code 02 for substantial maximal assist, you get a 1. Okay? If you think of it that way, it's much, much easier to manage. Takes a little, you're not going to remember it the first time you go to do it, but after you do it a couple times, you will remember. And even though your MDS, your software will determine functional scores, it's always nice to know, hey, if they were this, where would we be? Why? Because then you know when to do your IPAs. Because if this changes with your resident still there, you should do an IPA and you should get the higher level of reimbursement for the new functional score. But if you don't know how to figure it out and you're not punching it in your computer, you're not even going to know. So this is a way. There's a little diagram, cheat sheet. If you guys want some of those, you can get a hold of our office, PDPMpro.com, 1-801-PDPMpro. We will help and maybe give you some assistance on how to get some of the tools you could use for this stuff too as well. Everyone should have some little tools. But this is one way you could look at this and try to remember it, and at least you'll know how it works. Everyone, even though your computer does it for you, you should know how it works. All right? So what's the rest? Say people aren't doing this stuff. Did the patient refuse the activity completely? I'm not doing it. Not doing it today. Not feeling well. Not doing it. It's day 3. You have no more room. Completely refuse it. Yep, they're not doing it. Resident refuse, 07. Okay? No, they're not refusing. That wasn't the problem. If that wasn't the problem, not attempted, do the resident not performing this activity prior, I should say performing, says perform, trying to save some room here. But if they didn't do the activity before the current illness or the injury. So if they weren't walking, we're not going to make them walk because they don't walk. That's kind of what it's saying. If they did not do these, if they never dressed their lower body in the ALF or in the nursing home before, or they went to the hospital, came back, now they're Med A, we're not going to even have to test it. They don't do it. We know they don't do it. So if that was a yes, you would say 09. Doesn't apply. It's not applicable. This person doesn't do those activities. We don't have to even test it. All right? Now, if that's not the problem, no, they used to do it. That wasn't what happened. Was there a lack of equipment, access to equipment, or weather problems or issues? Now, that's saying, was there a situation where you couldn't get to the equipment you needed? You wanted to do car transfer, you want to do stairs or something. I know you don't pay, it's not under PDPM, but there's still some things in there they could be doing. But you just did not have the available equipment to even try these things. Then you wouldn't be able to do that. Or say someone is COVID positive and they're in their room. You can't, it's not big enough to walk 15 feet straight. Might not be able to do that one either. So it all depends on if it's something just not available to you guys. And if that's a yes, 10, you code that a 10. Not attempted, do environmental limitations. If you say, no, that wasn't it. No, it wasn't, nothing going on like that. Was activity not attempted due to medical conditions or safety issues? Maybe the doctor says, hey, I want Mrs. Smith on bed rest, for the next week and a half. It's too late. No section. Now, could you go back and do an IPA? Yeah, you could. If it changes it, if it makes it any better, and the reimbursement's going to be higher. After that 2 weeks has gone by, she's able to do her walking again. You can redo your section GG because that not being out of bed affects a lot of ADLs, right? And that's what GG's testing. There's self-care abilities. Yeah, you could do that. But if you couldn't do it on the first one, because of those limitations, because the doctor says for safety's sake, for her medical condition, you are not to get her out of bed, then that would be, yep, that's the problem, can't do it. So we would code 88, not attempted. All right? So that would be the quick decision tree process if you would want to use that to determine if you are getting confused or you're missing any sections or you want to make sure you're right on line. That's a good way to lay it out, way to think about it in your head when you go through the progressions. That's the word I was trying to think of earlier. When you go through your progressions of what they're doing or not doing, that's a great way to do it. A resource you could actually use, by the way, you take these out, you cut them and paste them and put them in another sheet. It's a great resource. Okay? Now, obviously, you're not going to get a functional score for any of these. These all equate to 0. You didn't do it. They didn't have any function. I figured everybody would. That's not a difficult one to figure out. But functional score is 0 for all of these. You still need to go through the process of adding them up, but it would be 0. All right, here it is. This is a really cool thing that I made. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through, and then for the first couple, I'm actually. I brought some scenarios here that I put together, and I'm actually going to, I'm like, well, what's a better way to do this? Might as well start throwing in some real-life examples and just going through these. So I'm going to give you guys some information about a patient, okay, that kind of matches up with what I'm going to be showing you guys. So Figure we're getting towards the holidays, right? Mrs. Claus is going to be the resident I'm going to be working with. Now, so Mrs. Claus, we're going to actually score the MDS for GG. And I have all the information you guys need. I have the coding items and the coding levels that you could code for each one of these. I have all of the section GG items that contribute to it. We have how they're scored. We have what contributes to both PT and OT and nursing, right? And we even have the, down here in this area here, we have the admission performance and then the scoring that we just went over. Have those listed here for you. So everything's right here. We're going to go through it. Here is what you would put on the MDS. These are the actual item numbers in the MDS all the way down. This is kind of how to apply, if it's going to be individual score or if it's going to be an average score, if it goes to OT and PT, and for nursing. See that? Real cool. So we're going to actually go through this. So first one, eating, way up here. We're up here. We're starting with the top one. Food is brought to Mrs. Claus, and she is set up with her drink to her right because it's her dominant hand. She can eat the meal, no problem, but she needs someone to clean up after all 3 meals. How would you think that would be coded? That would be, obviously, setup and cleanup assistance. I actually word setup and cleanup are in both of these, so that would give you a good idea. Plus, remember that independent thing in the middle, that there is some kind of independence with this. So when you think about that, and we go back down to here, the 5 and 6, the 4, you're probably already remembering that stuff. So what that means is you're going to give that level of 4. Now, these are scored individually. And we say individually because some of them are where I have this average score. You're going to add them up and divide them by 2, add them up, divide them by 3, add these up, divide by 2. These, they go straight across. No averaging, no adding with other ones. They just go straight across. That's what that means. So the individual score would be 4 for both PT and OT and nursing because it's individual. All right, so next one, oral hygiene. Mrs. Claus needs her self-care items brought to her. And the CNA may stay or leave the room while she performs the self-care. Once finished, the CNA will return to the room and return the items. Therapy scores her at standby assist to do all self-care, but has a goal of getting to modified independence. So when therapy's working, their functional level and their eval for her, and probably her goal or her new goal would be modified independence, but her current status is standby assist. Okay? But CNA are documenting, they bring her the stuff, leave it with her, come back, clean up. What would you score that? Now you want to think about this. Okay? The standby assist for therapists may be because they want her to perform the entire task. That's how we write our goals. I want Mrs. Smith's self-care morning routine independent. And right now, she needs standby assist. I want her to be at modified independence because I'm going to work with her on some strategies to be able to get this done for herself. And I'm going to be in there every morning. But right now, she's standby assist. Okay? We're working on something here. You know, we have a goal. We're actively trying to change the way she's doing it. CNAs and nursing have a different goal. Theirs is just to get her what she needs so she can take care of herself, right? So they're already at the point where they can just bring her setup stuff. She does it on her own, and they bring it back. Who is the usual performance? Okay, it's not supervision, right? That's why you would score it at a setup or cleanup assist, because nursing, you don't have to go to a supervision or a touch assist just because therapy has it for standby assist. This would still be setup because that's what the nursing staff is saying. That's all they have to do. That's once again as a 4, and that will do the score for the individual score for that. Even though it doesn't even contribute to the nursing score, this is the usual performance. It's not therapy related or locked down to therapy. It doesn't matter. I've had people tell me, "Why we can't? They don't contribute to nursing, so it's just going to be what therapy says." No, it's not. It has usual performance for all of these things. Okay, and it's not even supposed to have any intervention from therapy involved at all yet. I'm going to talk about that in a second too. All right, so that's a good example of kind of how those things. That's a real example, by the way, how those things get, not Mrs. Claus, but the functional score. But that's a real easy how those things get confusing. So toilet hygiene. I want you to think about this too. Does toilet hygiene include clothing management, up and down? Does that include that? Think of it in your head if you think it is. If you thought it does include that, you'd be correct. Clothing management is involved and does get coded in this scoring. I had somebody tell me the other day that it wasn't. It is. Includes clothing. If you can't get your clothes off and you use the toilet or the commode, you can't complete your toileting task. So it's not just the act of the cleanup or whatever it is. That's has more to do with the transfer. Transfer is just the transfer without the toileting part in it. That's where they're getting confused. So don't get confused with that. Toilet hygiene includes clothing management. That's the hardest part of it, by the way. Most of the hardest part. All right, so therapy says Mrs. Claus needs min assist for toilet hygiene, working towards independence. Nursing states that they give touch assist for balance, but also must assist by lowering and pulling up her clothing, her lower body clothing. So, let me say that one more time. Nursing says they give touch assist for balance, but must also assist with the lowering of her lower body clothing and the pulling up of her lower body clothing daily. So they still need to do some of the clothing management, right? So even though it's min assist for therapy, and again, min assist for a therapist would be around that 25% of managing of the clothes. I really didn't say how much a percent by managing, but what nursing said. But this is where you collaborate. Okay, so if therapists are saying they're doing about 25% of it, right? And we're saying they're just helping with the clothing management, and therapy's working on other goals and all these other things, kind of where they're going to be fall. We would put this one at that are doing less than half of the effort from the nursing staff on the usual performance. So even though they say they only have to give this touch assist for balance, throwing in that clothing management and having to help get them all the way up and all the way down, and then therapy saying the min assist, this is one where they'll be coming out more at the, just because the nursing documentation is stating it, they're going to be coming out at a partial or moderate assist, doing less than half the effort. Now, if it was just pulling clothes up and down, lower body dressing, it may be a little bit more, and they could fall into the max assist, but we're talking about the whole hygiene process, right? So if half the, even if you have to pull up, even if it took you more than half the effort to get clothes up and down, there's still a lot of other stuff we have to do here to complete the process. They have to, the cleaning of themselves, the getting on and off the toilet, making sure that they can have everything out of the way when they sit and get up and use appropriate the tissue and everything, all these other things that are going on, right? This would be one where even though she needs help with that clothing management, it's still less than half of the entire activity that we're scoring here, right? So that's where they're going to come out at the 0.3. But don't get confused about only the touch assist when you go on to say dealing with the clothing. That comes out to be, in our little thing we figured out, a 2. Okay, and that's the individual score, so that's going to go back for OT and nursing. Okay? We're going to do one more of these, and then I'm going to bust through the rest because I know these will just take too much time, and we have some more examples at the end. So, sitting in line. Mrs. Claus needs steadying and verbal cues to get her in the middle of the bed so she's comfortable and safe. Okay? Sitting to line. Now, a little help, a little effort here and there would still be giving you this touching assistant because she's not needing to be lifted in the middle. She needs some steadying and verbal cues to get to the middle. She can do it herself, right? She just needs to know if she's there or she's in the right spot. I remember getting people in bed once in a while. They're right on the edge. There's oh yeah, it feels good. Now you got to get all the way in the middle so you're safe. So you can turn a little bit when you can, do some bed mobility. So you've got to make sure that that you include that. That's part of it. If she can get on the edge and she's right on the edge, but she's in there, you're not done. You need to be in a spot where you need to be safely. And for the evening, you can leave them. So don't forget that last little end part of making sure that everything's set. If she can't get her pillows where she wants them and needs somebody to help her, she's still going to need some little bit of assistance there. At least some verbal assistance to make sure that everything's where she needs it and where she needs to be. Her call lights and reach and all those other things that go along with that. So you got to make sure you take credit for all those things too, and not just say she's independent, she doesn't need help at all, because as we can find out, sometimes we often give more help. But don't offer it when you're scoring this. That's really hard to do too. If someone is, if somebody's there and offering to help someone, a lot of people are going to say, okay, So try to say, we're trying to make sure you can do this on your own, and I'm just going to be here for safety or just to kind of help you out. Now, that would be a little scoring system we got. That's a 0-4, comes down to a 0-3. All right. Now that's the last example I'm going to get, because I'm going to get into the averages, and we'll cover examples again later with a few more, because this obviously would be a long process. So say we did the lying to sitting to the edge of the bed, and she's in the partial Termad. Sometimes getting up, getting your feet up, getting ready. Sometimes that takes a little more effort. So we're going to say that she needed that partial to moderate assist, which is going to be that 2. Now, we're to the point where we have the sit to lying, lying to sitting, edge of bed, where we have to start doing our averages. And it is simpler than everyone kind of makes it turn out to be at first. So you take 170 B and C, you're going to add them up, and then divide them by 2. That's really all that it is. So we have 3, we have 2, we have 5. Divided by 2, 2.5. Now, here's another little tip. Don't convert these to the next highest number, or average, or not average, to the next whole number, I guess, until you get to your final scoring process. Leave it as it is and carry it over to both your OT and nursing. It's 2.5, 2.5. You don't really you don't really round, that's the word I'm looking for. You don't really round up or down until you get to your final score. That's what the REI manual says. So don't start rounding just in these, round when you get to your final score. All right. So we have sit to lying, which we're going to say she needed a 0-4, which would be supervision, touching assistance, which is a 3. We have bed or chair to chair, which is going to be, we're going to say, is a moderate assist, a little more assistance with that. So that's going to be a 3 to a 2. Then one more, we're going to have toilet transfer, not toilet hygiene, toilet transfer. And this was a little bit tougher for her. Some of this might not make sense because I think I started making these things up, so I made the averages come out for you a little bit better. She may have only needed partial, but hey, say when we did it, it was the usual performance. The nurses were saying they need more than half the effort. That's what you score it at. Doesn't necessarily have to always make sense. Sometimes that really is. There's a lot going on in the bathroom. You can't get your wheelchair all the way in there. There's a lot of other things that could affect that. Where the grab bars are at, their upper body weakness could be affecting their ability to get in on and off of the toilet. So there are some things that could make this very difficult. That would be a 1. So if it's 0-2, come down to the 1. Average, these 3 get averaged together. Whoops. And all you really got to do is the 3, 2, 1, which is 6. Divide it by 3 is going to be the 2. So then you're going to have your overall functional score for those 3 components. Again, if you do get that average number in a decimal point, please don't do that until the end. It can change it. I can be honest, in most cases it won't. If you average it up to a 3 or average it up to a 2 or average it down to a 1, it probably will come out to be okay, but there are a few circumstances where that could affect the overall score. Okay. Then we go to PT and OT, carry that right across. All right, so the last one, we have walking 50 feet, 2 turns. And these ones, therapy will probably have a bigger part in. These are ones that could be a little more complicated. So you do want to make sure that these are done safely. Safety is always number one. If they can't be done safely, there's ways we can code that, or we can make sure therapy is helping us out with these and make sure that they're coded correctly. So say she's a pretty good walker for 50 feet, and they can use their walker, by the way. Don't forget that. Don't tell them they can't do that. If she doesn't have it at the time, it'd probably be in your best interest to get it for her before she tries this. You want an accurate score. So say she needs only supervision or touching assistance to walk that 50 feet. That 0.4 comes out to be a 3. Then, say she has some endurance issues, right? Mrs. Claus really is good at the 50, but she has a really tough time going that 150. That seems to be a lot more challenging to her. So you need a wheelchair follow from another helper, either a CNA, say therapy's walking the person and the CNA's following. That's a great way to do it, by the way. Two disciplines kind of working together, finding the best level assistance. The therapist could give some tips to the CNA. CNA could tell a therapist how they usually do and if that's how they do it. It's not a bad idea to have your therapist working with CNAs when they're needing helpers. I think it's great. A lot of times we'll use our assistants. You have to be careful with that because we cannot be billing. That's really not, you have to be careful about billing that. If you're going to have your assistant billing with the PT and all they're doing is a wheelchair follow, usually not something they could be doing. Doing it with CNAs isn't a bad idea. It's actually a very good one, and get some collaboration between your teams too, by the way. So you need that second helper. What does that mean? Dependent. No matter, even if it's for safety and she didn't even need to use it. If you had that person there, if the therapist felt strongly enough that person had to be there, that's how you got to code it. Say you tried it the second time, she did have to sit down halfway through. That's what the rules are. You need that second person. You need to code it as dependent. And for dependent, you get a big 0. So 3 plus 0 is 3. You still add it in there. Why not? Make sure you're being following this all the way through. 3 divided by 2, 1.5, right? Don't round it. Leave it. Carry it across to your OT-PT score. Then we'll total these up, and we get our functional score, the final functional score, the section GG score that you will see on that end split for nursing and therapy. They'll have the clinical category for therapy. They'll put them in a certain CMG is generated by that and what this functional score comes out of. And then we have nursing. They'll get into their nursing category, right, based upon the needs. It could be reduced physical function, clinically complex, could be special care high. And then you add this to it. And then that will give you your final score. That's actually how you do it. This is all that goes into that. And adding these up will give you that. So if we look at the PT and OT one first, we got a 4, we have a 4, we have a 2, a 2.5, a 2, and a 1.5. It's going to give you the score of 16. And that is very common. Falls in that average range of 10 to 23 for functional score. Now, nursing, we got the 4, the 2, 2.5, and the 2, which is 10.5. That's a half. Now we can do our rounding. We round up or down based upon that 5. That 5, just like everyone does. If it's over the 5, if it's under the 5, you go down. So 11 would be the final score for nursing, and that's how those things work. Okay, really interesting to lay it all out. I try not to. It is complicated if you've never had to go through it. People have to go through this a couple times. I think everyone does. But as soon as you get it, it's almost like second nature, I guess, in your head. So that's kind of how it's laid out. But I think the most important part, and again, software will do this for you. We all know that. We all know there's a bunch of stuff out there that, this is calculated behind the scenes with some calculations, analytical calculations. But I think the most important part was hearing some of those categories and some of the discrepancies between therapy and nursing and how you work through those to find the usual performance. If you keep focusing on those words, usual performance, I guarantee you will be more successful in scoring these correctly if you keep that usual performance in mind. All right? So that was that. Now, like I said, I'm going to give you guys these little tidbits to go through this all the way through. Again, I think hitting these sections one more time. We saw them in part 1, might have been a while ago. Go into part 2. It's always good to run through them one more time, keep them fresh in our head. Just had all this great coding stuff you're going over and you understand now. So it's a great time to review through these one more time. So for section GG, when we look at 100, the prior performance or prior functional scores, they still are using the old scoring system for this. Probably because, the facility staff is not participating in scoring this. So we're getting this sometimes from family members, sometimes from the patients directly. So this is a little bit easier way to understand what we're asking. So they still use the independent, need some help, dependent, and that's really what they're looking for. So just keep that in mind. That's why they use this, and that's why they do it. You don't want to try to apply the GG stuff. It's messy for us to try to figure out sometimes. So why you don't want to get patients involved with that. You just want to get a general idea. Hey, what were you doing before? Do you need a lot of help? Were you independent? Do you need a lot of help? That's fine because they are where they are now. We're just going to try to get them as best as we can get them and move them back to could be used for discharge planning, where they came from, what they were doing. Is their house still appropriate? Are those stairs something that realistically they're going to be able to do again? Should they have a room on the first floor, not the second floor? All those things are kind of helping with this. So remember, usual ability prior to the illness. This has a 3-day look back. All right. It does not change any reimbursement. It does not contribute to any functional scores, but it could contribute to some of the outcome functional measures when you're showing improvement. It is part of your reporting QRP program, so you definitely want to make sure you include this. Just because I said it's not included in your PDPM payment does not mean it's not important. Definitely want to do this because you will have to report this, and you don't have to hit 80% of the reporting requirements. And you use, we just covered that, the 3-point scale, not the 6. All right, so now we're back into the GG. GG 130. This is one of most of the items we already covered. 3 of the 7 items in this section does affect that PDPM score. And those are those first 3, ABC, eating, oral hygiene, and toilet hygiene. Definitely direct impact on reimbursement. Does affect quality measures. It uses a 6-point scale. All right. The assessment period is the first and last 3 days of the stay, unless it's an IPA, which people don't do anyway, so it doesn't matter. Just kidding. Remember, keep IPAs in mind, guys, for sure. We'll cover how IPAs, how we do that in a minute. Observation, self-report, family report, direct care staff, all can be contributing to this. You want to make it accurate as possible. You may need to use all those items. You want to make sure that what you're checking is accurate and the information you're getting is right. And I'm talking to MDS coordinators. It is your final call. So a client just asked me the other day, who decides on GG? Who does? Is it nursing? Is it therapy? Who's the end all be all? It's the MDS coordinator. They make the decision of what goes on here, and they need to do the research to make sure it's the usual performance. Without a device, they could do it either way, but they can use any device that they feel like they should use to make them more successful with that. That is completely up to them, and they should. How do you usually do it? That's what you need to say. How do you usually do it? What do you use to do it this way? Let them do what they want to use. Don't try to change the way they do stuff. They obviously will not do as well if you're going to try to change the way they do it. Let them use what they usually use. And those would be the three pieces that would contribute to PDPM that we were speaking of. Again, not that the other pieces aren't important. They are, and all those other pieces are something like therapy will be working on. So that proves how important they are, but those are the only ones that contribute. Now, it's at 170, mobility, the few little things to give you here. Usual performance, collected the start and the end of the Medicare stay, just like the other 130. Discharge goals established on the 5-day MDS, and this kind of applies to both. I just kind of broke it up a little bit. Usual interim performance on the IPA. We do want to change this. Therapy should not be doing GG, A through G on the MDS. This is proven to lower facility reimbursement. And we touched about this on part 1. Therapy usually scores people higher because patients do better with therapy department, and it is not the usual performance. I'm sorry. Therapy works with them a few times a day on very, very specific items, very, very specific goals, and the usual performance is what they're doing the rest of their day. They may be focused on certain things in therapy. Now, do they contribute? Of course. We just talked about that on the previous slide. You need to take all those things into consideration, even as some pretty good examples of that when we're going over the actual scoring items that we were just speaking of. So absolutely contributes, but they should not be the ones in charge of it. Should not be writing down or even having them enter it. And I've seen that before. Okay? And those would be the ones that we contributed to PDPM. Showed that on part 1 too. And that would be the bottom ones. Okay? Again, B, C, D, E, F, J, and K, all helping with PDPM reimbursement on that functional score level. And again, nursing scores, nursing reimbursement can be greatly affected if you are scoring these incorrectly. All right. Now, we are going to look through these one more time here. When we're going through the overall top to bottom MDS, we also want to take a look at their mobility. We want to make sure that and none of these are going to contribute to PDPM. We haven't talked about it much, but it is important that we know how people get around, what they used to use and what they want to use and what they need to use. It's discharge planning, community mobility, all very, very important. All right. Do not code wheelchair mobility if the resident uses a wheelchair only on transport between locations within the facility. You've seen this before. If someone comes in with a wheelchair, and all of a sudden we're coding them with a wheelchair. If they don't use a wheelchair, you don't need to code a wheelchair. And if they're just using it to get to and from the van or a dialysis appointment, that isn't something we usually code. We're only coding wheelchair mobility for people who use wheelchairs when they usually are moving around, forever. So I have a really interesting story about that. I used to, I was living in Maryland. This is years ago. I don't know. But I was a regional manager for a rehab contract therapy company. Back in rugs, we used to have to come in and help with evals on the weekend, maybe help do some treatments. And I had seen this patient. She had not been there long. And she was in fairly good shape, fairly happy lady. She was going to get one more treatment from me on the weekend. And usually when I got there, I went to the rooms first. And I was like, hey, Mrs. Smith, I'm going to be down in about 20 minutes or so. Come get you for therapy. Oh, great. That's great. I'm glad I'm good on the weekend. Want to get out as fast as possible. I understand. We're going to do what we can. So she scoots herself down while I'm still getting ready. So I'm like, all right, come on in. I haven't looked at your eval yet, but I'll, we'll chat a little bit and maybe get you moving around a little bit. So I said, you know what? How about if you sit over there on that mat for me? How about get you out of this wheelchair, sit on the mat? She's like, oh, yeah, that'd be great. She stands right up, walks over to the mat table and sits down. Just like I would do it. I'm like, what are you doing in a wheelchair? Every time I see you, you're in your wheelchair. She's like, they gave me this when I got here, and they said, somebody would take it back or just keep using it until someone tells me to stop using it. And I was like, well, you're coming to therapy? Are you? So I got her eval quick. I wanted to make sure. I'm like, hopefully they're not doing wheelchair mobility things with this lady. And they weren't. They were doing very high level balance, very high level ADL skills. So why she had a wheelchair was beyond me. I'm like, well, do you feel like you need it? Do you feel tired? Do you feel like you're not going to make it all the way back? No. And she's like, no, not at all. I mean, I don't think I need it. I never used a wheelchair before. And I was like, well, don't leave it here then. Go back without it. She never used it again. So, good example about everyone being on the same page, and just because it's in the FDS to code for wheelchair and use of wheelchair, if they don't need it, don't code it. I mean, people give out wheelchairs like they're a piece of clothing sometimes in the nursing homes, and then people, you don't want someone getting worse or getting more dependent on it. She was completely capable of walking around without even an assistive device. I mean, she didn't even need a walker or anything. I mean, she was great. Never used one again. The rest of the time she was there, she left in about a week or two. So that was a good outcome, but could have been a different idea if someone gets caught in a chair and no one takes it back, and all of a sudden they need it forever. Don't want to get in that situation. So great example of how people who don't need stuff shouldn't have the stuff, shouldn't be assessing it. All right, so that's what the second part said. Admission assessment for wheelchairs should only be coded for residents who use a wheelchair prior to admission. All right. And then the last thing says here, CMS anticipates that an interdisciplinary team of qualified clinicians is involved in assessing the resident. Most states, PTAs, CODAs, can't do this stuff. Not that they really don't understand it. It's just their practice act and how they reference to assessing and them not being able to do it. Nothing personal, but you want to make sure you don't get to a situation where your coding gets questioned and possibly changed because somebody who shouldn't have been doing it did it. All right? So let's see. Look back periods. Real quick, because they're not really that many of them anymore. When we look at the Medicare stay, it's going to be the first 3 days they're there, right? First 3, day 1, day 2, day 3. Should be tracking your CNAs, tracking how their functional levels are being done on a usual basis. Therapy they usually get their evals done at beginning time. Line them up, MDS coordinator, make a good decision on those. Now, when they leave, 3 days back, end of the PPS stay, and then 3 days back for, now if they're an unexpected discharge, you don't have to do this. If they go out to the hospital, obviously you didn't know it was happening. If they go AMA, didn't know it was happening. So it's those expected discharges, those anticipated discharges that these be required for. So 3 days from when they get there, 3 days before they leave. Gives you really an idea. IPAs, all right? If you ever decide to do one, which please start doing them. They're for your benefit and your residents' benefit, by the way. It's the 3 days back from the ARD. All right. So when we do an IPA, we have a clear start date. We set up our assessment window, which will be 7 days back. Your GG interim performance will be day 7, 6, and 5 of your IPA window for your ARD. All right? Not the first 3 days, not day 1, 2, and 3. People get confused about that. It's not day 1. It's not the first day of that assessment window when you're trying to establish your new score. It's going to be the ARD. They want it closest to the ARD as possible, kind of the opposite of what it is for the admission, but they're already there. So it's an IPA, and they want to make sure when the ARD hits, they want to know exactly what level they're at. Okay. Now, for your OBRA assessments, it's going to be the same thing as an IPA. It's going to be 3 days for your look back. This can be state specific. Not all states are doing this. This is for those annual assessments, the comprehensives. When you do when you pick your window, it is going to be just those 3 days. Some people think it's the whole look back. It's not. It's just the 3 day window, just like it would be for an admission. But it's day ARD, 3 and 2 more days. So 1, 2, 3. 3 days worth from that ARD. Not too complicated. Only 2 situations you can fall into with that. Your admission, your IPA, actually 3, I guess. Your admission, your IPA, and your OBRA assessment, if your state's doing that, which a lot of states are. And eventually that's going to turn into your CMI system, is going to be using the same system as PDPM, which should be exciting for all of us. Alrighty, now, awesome examples. Put some work into these, actually, just to make them work out to be ultra useful. All right, so we're only going to do like, I think 3 or 4 of these. So we're getting to the end here. You learned all the information you could. And I know I go fast through these and I put a lot of information in them. That's why we like to turn them into our training tools that we use in the future, because then you can go back and watch these on demand as many times as you want until you feel like you're comfortable, with it. But to go through them quick is, to please everybody that's watching them. Some people are a little bit better at these than others. And some people need go over a little more, a few more times before they really get it. So anyway, example 1, this is prior function. Okay, this is 100C. This is that first question, the prior level. Prior to admission to the hospital for knee surgery, following his accident or following his recent admission to the SNF rehabilitation, Mr. ABC experienced severe knee pain upon ascending and particularly descending his internal and external stairs at his home. Mr. ABC required assistance from his wife when he was using the stairs to steady him in the event his left knee would buckle. Mr. ABC's wife was not available to interview, and there were no other medical record documents or anything like that that clearly explained his prior level of function. Okay, so what are we looking for here? How would you score 100C? Okay, that has to do with his mobility up and down stairs. Would you do independent, need some help, dependent, or unknown? Now, see, this is exactly why you don't use that 6-point system. This is a very common scenario. You have a patient, newly admitted, that's kind of telling you what they could do. Can't really do it because they're in their new functional status now. They'll be GG, or I'm sorry, they'll be PDPM for GG for your PPS assessment. It's not the prior level. It's not the prior function. You're thinking about prior stuff here, so you can't check it. There's no one there to collaborate it, and there's no documentation to prove it. So if you make it too complicated, these things would be impossible to figure out. But from what he said, and if you feel he's cognitively aware enough and everything else is making sense, he knows his address, he's alert and oriented ×3, this would be coding as 2, needed some help. He admits he didn't go up and down those stairs completely independently. He had to have his wife come with him and had to help him in case he got a little unsteady. So that would be the rationale before this. Needed some help since the patient reported it, and a patient report is to be coded as long as there's no reason that it is inaccurate or the patient is unable to communicate in a correct way because of confusion. So this will be what you would put it at. You have to take him for his word, and if the rest of your assessments and your evaluations and everything you're doing makes sense, and everything he's saying makes sense, there's no reason why you wouldn't believe him. And he clearly says he needed some help, wasn't dependent, but needed a little hand, and wasn't independent. So that'll be a really easy one. All right, number 2, a toilet transfer. John has paraplegia incomplete, pneumonia, and chronic respiratory condition. John prefers to use the bedside commode when moving his bowels. Due to weakness and history of falls, he requires significant assistance with transfers. He usually needs 2 CNAs to assist during the toilet transfer. But when you look at the therapy evaluation, therapy evaluated him at max assist of 1. All right, so here's one of those little conflicts. How would you code GG170F, toilet transfer? All right. Supervision, toe touching assistance, substantial, max assist, dependent, or refused. Now, this would be dependent. Why? 2 CNAs. Always is dependent. Code is 0-1 dependent, since it usually requires 2 helpers to complete the toilet transfers. Therapy's max assist ×1 is not considered the usual performance, right? Because you have CNA, direct care staff, documenting that they're needing 2 people. 2 people are planning to go in there. 2 people are going in there. Even though therapy put max assist of 1, you would still put the dependent. All right? And that would make sense to me. Hey, that could be true. And that's probably a good idea. You know, I'm a therapist. I get him at the best times of the day. I get him when he's ready to go. He's ready to try this. I'm max encouragement. I have some techniques that I'm trying that only I can do it with him. I want him to get better. I want him to be able to one assist. May not be there yet completely, but 2 CNAs helping to my one probably makes sense. All right? You wouldn't want to use max assist. You're gonna start, again, scoring people better than they really are doing. Okay, let's go to number 3, self-care, GG 130. Miss A suffered a stroke a few months ago. The result in some cognitive limitations. She brushes her teeth at the sink, but is unable to initiate the task on her own. The OT cues Mrs. A to put the toothpaste on her toothbrush, brush all the areas on her teeth, and then rinse her mouth after brushing. The OT remains with Mrs. A, providing only verbal cues until she completes the task of brushing her teeth. OT's level of function is standby assist on the therapy documentation. Nursing shows Mrs. A needs both verbal cues and occasional touching assistance to maintain her balance throughout the activity. All right? So we have therapy, okay, that is scoring her as standby assist. And we have nursing that's scoring her with verbal cues and occasional touching assistance throughout the activity. Okay? What do you need to, how would you code 130B? Setup and cleanup assistance, supervision or touching assistance, partial, moderate assistance, substantial, maximum assistance. Now, after reading this, after knowing that it's nursing, after knowing that me as a therapist working with a patient, and I'm really encouraging her to be independent. She's really trying to be independent for me. She's trying to reach a goal. She could probably do the whole thing once during the day without any touching assistance. But when you have nursing staff coming in here early in the morning, late at night, before meds, maybe after meds and their side effects to medications, if nursing is telling you she needs some touching assistance, that is what you need to score it at, right? Getting the theme here. You really need to dictate this more on the patient's ability, how it's usually done. Now, if we had her as a min assist with OT, and then you have your nursing staff saying they only needed supervision or setup, that would be, hey, that's something we can talk about. Why is therapy saying her needing much more help and we're just setting her up and leaving? That sounds like something bad might happen there. That would be a reason of concern and a discussion. But since this is another one, makes sense, all right? Yeah, she could do the whole thing with me once a day when she's really pumped up and trying to do well. She's had her lunch. She's had all her meds. She's in a good mood. But maybe a different story when you go in there at 7:30, 8 in the morning when it's time to get up and they're getting people ready for breakfast. She may be a totally different person, you know? So not that you're grading her at her worst. You're grading her what she usually, this is what the nursing put, usually needs a little toe touching or occasional touching assistance. And so that's what you need to score it at. All right? So it would be coded for supervision or touching assistance since nursing staff stated both the verbal cues and touching assistance. Although therapy did not give touching assistance, standby assist does demonstrate more than just setup, so you wouldn't do the setup, and nursing is more accurate usual performance. All right, so if there's times she needs that, you want to make sure you score it that way. Okie dokie. Number 4, mobility, GG 0170. I put only 70, but that's okay. Mrs. R has severe rheumatoid arthritis and uses forearm crutches to ambulate. The CNA brings Mrs. R her crutches and helps her to stand at the side of the bed. The PT working with Mrs. R documented after 2 treatment sessions, she was able to go sit to stand with only verbal cues. Okay? The certified nursing assistant documents providing some lifting assistance to Mrs. R to stand to a standing position both before and after PT intervention, providing less than half the effort for the activity. Okay? So we have a CNA that's saying there is some assistance needed, and we have a PT, a therapist, that is documenting that after the second treatment session, they're able to do it with only verbal cues, which is great. Everyone should be excited about that. We're making progress, looking good. So, how would you code GG 170? Setup or cleanup, supervision or touching, partial or moderate assist, substantial max assist. Okay? We would do partial and moderate assist, even though we have a PT documenting that after 2 sessions, okay, which can still be in that, say they did an eval, they came in a treatment, and the second day is to be their second session, it's still within the 3-day window for section GG. And they're saying that they're only, needing verbal cues already. Now, a couple reasons we would want to make sure we did not code that. Because number one, section GG should be coded without any clinical intervention. This is supposed to be how just they do it. We're not supposed to be coding it after they've gotten 3 treatments of therapy and they're getting better. They wanted to know, how did they come in? What was their usual performance at the admission without intervention? So that's one reason why, you wouldn't do it. The other reason is what I just explained in the last example. We're working with once a day. They're excited to do this. Had their lunch, had their meds, had all this, they were thinking about this, doing it with PT. They just do a little bit better. I mean, that's just the way it is. Now, if it's 9 o'clock at night and he puts out his call light, calls someone in to come help him, he's getting tired, wants to get up and do some of his self-care, maybe use the restroom, he's probably going to need help. Even though he did it with the second session of therapy, that's great, he's making progress, it doesn't mean they're not going to be helping him anymore. He's going to need help on some days, and that would be more of his usual performance. There's going to be probably more days he's still needing help than days he's not. Now, we're getting there, and we're making progress, and therapy is working hard to get him there, but for GG, he needs to be coded as partial to moderate assistance. So, again, the rationale for that is going to be partial moderate assistance because the helper providing lifted assistance for less than half the effort. The resident to complete the activity sit to stand. Nursing interaction is more the usual performance, and section GG should be coded prior to therapy intervention. Okay, that's really what the RAI manual says. So, and does that make sense? Now, the next part of that is putting those two things together. Okay, if there is this conflict, therapy saying this and nursing saying this, does it make sense? Is that realistic? Yes, it is. He could be standing there and do it after a second session on his own and still need assistance from nursing. That would make sense. Now, if therapy was saying he needed maximum assist and your nursing staff is putting supervision or touching assistance, not saying that couldn't happen in some circumstances, but that's something you have to look closer at. That doesn't make sense. Therapy saying max assist and we're saying touching assist is the usual performance. No, that wouldn't make sense. So that's one you want to be looking at closer. So that is a good example of how to determine if these things are lining up, and that's why you have to have your whole team on board when looking at these and understanding the usual performance and what that really means. Okay, that's it. That's section part 2, section GG, success training. I think we got a really good handle on both how these line up in other disciplines, therapy, nursing, GG, right? And we also have a very good understanding of how these are coded now. A lot of people don't have an opportunity to see those averages and numbers because they're done behind the scenes in some of our software, but it's very, very good to understand those. Also, I think a lot of people have struggled with some of the discrepancies between what therapy is seeing, what nursing is seeing. I think we have some really good examples in there, focusing on the usual performance, okay, but still getting input from the entire team to make sure that, hey, what I'm saying and what you're saying, it does make sense. That would be something I think that may be happening with this patient, or hey, that doesn't make any sense at all. We need to relook at that. That's all we're looking for. If you're having one discipline do it, you're not having that dialogue. So make sure you do that. Okay. Now, if you need any other help, if you have any other questions, you can get a hold of us. You can hit us up on our website at www.pdpmpro.com. You can email us at info@jmdhealthcare.com, or you can even make it the easiest thing possible and scan the QR on the screen. And all you need to do is put in a little couple words about, you can even say, hey, give me a call. I want to ask you some questions. Hit send, and done. It's going to pre-populate an email for you. Couldn't make it any more simpler besides doing it for you. But anyway, give us a call on the phone if you really want to get some quick answers. Usually don't have a problem getting through the lines during the day. Nobody calls on the phone anymore, even though they still work. Give us a call at 1-801-PDPMpro, and we'll be putting out some other webinars in the near future, hopefully expanding on this MDS, expanding on GG and how it can help you and how you can perfect it, and make sure your residents and your facility both get everything that they deserve. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you for watching the webinar, and I hope it was interesting, and we will see you soon. Take care.